So many times in life, we get thrown for a curve and don't know how to react.
I can tell you the first time I had sex, how was my marriage going to survive? It's over. I remember standing in front of the judge with my 3-week-old baby, looking at my ex. I saw the look on his face, and it was complete rage.
Welcome to When Life Throws You a Curve and How to Make the Adjustment with your host, Katie Hamilton.
Hey everyone, welcome to When Life Throws You a Curve and How to Make the Adjustment. I'm Katie Hamilton. Thank you so much for joining me today. So today we're going to take a brief time out from Pursue Unity. I am going to finish that series, but I have been thinking a lot about just, timing and the podcast, and I really felt like it was important to go back and continue laying some foundation of why I wanted to make the podcast to begin with. And I wanted to, make sure that I got that done and recorded within this first year. It was just important for me to really work from a pretty solid foundation. And I think it will actually better, it just enhance the Pursue Unity last 2 episodes we have on that series. So we're gonna go back in time. I'm gonna hit rewind on this episode and next week's episode, or the next episode whenever that comes out. It's always a little unpredictable. I'm always kept on my toes, so I just have to pass that along. But I want to kind of rewind and just talk about, in this episode today, about why it's important to have a good foundation. Why do we believe what we believe? Why is it important to know what we believe and why we believe it? Because if you haven't yet, at some point you will get served up a 4-letter word called life. And you have to know what you stand on, what's important to you, and why do you believe what you believe. If you have any hope of knocking it out of the park, for sure. And once you have a really solid, concrete belief structure of knowing who you are and, why you're here on this earth for this time and all of those things, all those, if you have answers to those questions, you can get in the batter's box and face whatever, the fiercest southpaw in all of the land, in the entire nation. And you're not going to be nervous. You're going to be confident because you know that you were created for this. You were made to do these things. And it's not just you, it's you in Christ. So I can't tell you at, the time in my life that we're going to talk about today that I had all of these, that I would have packaged this like this and put a bow on it, but I definitely was beginning to understand these concepts, and I really was asking myself hard questions. And for me personally, on the next episode, we'll talk a little bit more about why was it important when I started asking myself certain questions, why the answers for me in the beginning really brought more questions. But God really allowed me to have opportunities and used all of the situations I was in and circumstances for me to sort out those answers. And they really became part of me, like part of what helped form my belief systems about life, about God, about myself. And this happened, so early in my 20s. I was 23 when I really started piecing these things together. But I can tell you, I'm so glad. I can't tell you that I'm glad for the circumstances that they came from or came through, but I can tell you that nothing has been wasted, and it has prepared me for all of the stuff that I've gone through over the last 15 or 20 years. So in that sense, it's absolutely been worth it. And regardless of how you come to these answers. Like sometimes they come through situations that are challenging and trying, which is like, hello, kind of the point of this podcast. But this gets us to a place of how do we have joy when we're experiencing pain? And what does that look like practically? And how do you actually experience that? So I'm going to share something that I wasn't planning to share until today. When I got up, I was thinking about, recording today, and I just felt like the Lord dropped something in my lap and said, no, I'm going to have you talk about this. I was like, okay, well, just make that adjustment. And this, all of this, whatever this, it's all for him and for his glory anyway. So whatever he tells me to do, I'm going to be obedient. And I really can't wait to hit rewind, because I would never be able to talk about all of the stuff, quote, that I've experienced over the last 15 or 20 years and have it make nearly as much sense, or it's not going to be conveyed the same way if, unless I share how did it start? How did it get on this journey? So at times, if it seems like I'm just sharing, and this again will be more for the next episode, and I'll probably say this again, but if it seems like I'm talking just for the sake of talking about the quote badness of Josh, I want you to hear in my heart very clearly that that's never my intention. Some of the situations I'm going to talk about, yes, they do. It's going to reflect maybe not lovely on him. Okay, well, some of the stuff I'm going to talk about is not going to reflect lovely on me either. But it has so much less to do with the badness of Josh, but rather it's the goodness of Jesus that I experienced. And that's the things that, it's his goodness that I discovered in this process of life, and in some situations that were very, very hard. But I can tell you, I'm still living out things that are very hard in real time. And the only way that I'm able to still be dealing with stuff and new things and, some of the same things, and be sane and have so much love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and every fruit of the Spirit and gentleness and self-control, is because I learned about the goodness of God, more than, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, and they were concepts that I knew growing up, things that I learned. And, I would have said that I believed, but you don't really know what you believe until the rubber meets the road, or shit hits the fan, or you have to really walk it out and keep walking it out and knowing who you are and who Christ is, and he's your hope and he's your confidence. And that, it's then you can be in that batter's box knowing that you've trained for this, you've prepared for this, you were born to do this because Christ is with you, and he picked the time and the place that all of us were going to be like released into this world. So when he, was thinking about Katie, and when he was going to, release me into the world, like he had already created he already knew every single thing that I was going to go through. Some were going to be things that the enemy brought. Some were going to be like my own just really bad choices. But he chose this time. He chose for me to live on this earth starting in 1981 and still be here. And so I know that I have everything I need to be in existence in this time in history. And I know that I have every single thing I need, in Christ to make it and to be successful. And if God's with me, there's no one that can be against me, and it's going to be impossible for me to fail, because I'm not counting on me. All of my weaknesses, like that's when Christ's strength is made perfect through my life. And that's when his light shines through me the most, is through all of the cracks and the brokenness that I've experienced. I just give it all to him, and I just let him be all of the strength that I need. So I know that sounds great and lovely and whatever, but it's the truth. It is absolutely the truth, but I didn't get to this place and have lived this out for so many years and years without some really wrestling it out. And the way that he built me, the way that he made me, I wanted to know, like, I always had this bend for justice. I always had this I want justice. I remember being a child and I sang a song about child abuse when I was 4. But why my parents let me sing that song, I have no idea. I think I've mentioned that maybe on this podcast before. But I had this innate desire to speak up for people that couldn't speak up for themselves. And, if you're really a person that has this, justice bend to you, and you start asking yourself some hard questions, if you're really about justice, you have to dig deep, because, okay, well, if this is true, then what about this? And I had to go through that process and really get the questions to those answers to those questions that I had. Because it is in me to want justice. But trust me, through the process, I also realized how much I need grace and mercy. But anyway, I'm going to tell you guys a story. We're going to have a lot of story time, over the next couple of weeks. It's just going to be how it is. And I cannot promise that I won't drop an F-bomb. I'm going to try not to, but I'm just putting that out there. So if you have sensitive ears, just, skip. But I am aware. I'm going to try not to, but, we're going to talk about some hard things. And sometimes, hey, that's my disclaimer. So, when I was about to have my daughter, Julia, of course, it was not my plan to get pregnant at 18. Now, I don't know why I didn't think that I was going to. Really? You really didn't think you were going to get pregnant because you were behaving like your life depended on it. But it was like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant, what a shock. But it was actually a shock. I couldn't believe it. So my life changed courses pretty quickly, because I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm not... this is not really about me anymore. Now I'm going to be responsible for another human being's life. And so I had to change I had to do a 180, because I was just I'm going to have fun and party, and I'm just going to do my thing. And, that didn't last real long, but I'm so glad. I'm so glad that God gave me this little life when I was 19. I had her at 19. So, as I was preparing for her birth, all the new moms, we were going to have the best hospital and the best doctor, and I want to have this is going to be my birth plan, and we're going to do this Lamaze class, and are you going to do the Bradley method? There was all this talk, and I'm the only one my age that I know is pregnant. But I remember taking this Healthy Moms class, and I learned about stuff that I didn't know I needed to know about. There was all these old women having babies. They were in their mid 40s, popping out kids. And I mean, they were talking about stuff I'd never even heard of, and I'm okay, well, I'll do the Lamaze class, but my birth plan's real simple. I'm going to go in, I'm just going to make it easy. I'll place my order now. I'll take the epidural as the main course, and I want everything else that you got on the side in maximum doses. We just fine, and we're just gonna, that's just how it's gonna be. That's my plan. I still went to the classes, but I was so bothered, by them. There was this very helpless husband on one of the episodes singing she'll be coming around that mountain when she comes. I'm like, what is it? Why are we watching this? My mom went to class with me. She's so sweet. And she's like, well, pay attention. And I'm like, Mom, I already, I'm going for the epidural. Why would I not? Why would I not do that? That just Why would I ask for pain? That's just like ridiculous. So I, had my plan. Okay. It was like real simple. And I wanted to not feel pain. Like, very easy, people. This is very easy. So I get in there, and Julia came a couple weeks early. All my kids, I had all my babies early. But I was so glad to even have made it like as far as I did, because I was in labor at like 20 weeks with her and with Sierra. And, with Julia, I'll tell you just this real quick. I didn't know, obviously, what, contractions felt like or labor felt like. But even being 20 weeks pregnant at, 19, I knew there was something wasn't right. Like, I just knew that there's some things that, we as human beings we just know. Like, I couldn't have said what it was, but I went in there and I was having contractions that were like 2 minutes apart. But to me, it didn't feel painful. And they were like, oh my gosh, like they were started to give me, all the stuff to stop my labor, and then couldn't move, for like 16 weeks. I laid in a bed with, during that first pregnancy. So I was happy to have made it to the hospital. I'm like, okay, let's get this show on the road. And I reminded everybody, like, my plan, my plan. I signed up for the drugs. Thank you. Epidural. Whatever my room was, 301 or whatever it was, I'm like, okay, let's, and I kept asking the nurse, I'm like, hey, did you put that order in? Did you put that order in? And she kept, she was not a very nice woman, this woman, not at all. And, like, okay, and I'm like in labor now. And I'm like, did you put the order in? And she looked at me and she said, you've got 15 hours of labor ahead of you. You better deal with this. She's like, you haven't even scratched the surface yet. And I'm thinking, well, if I have not scratched the surface, like, then we really need to get the show on the road, because I've already felt way more than I intended on feeling. Like, what is with this woman? I asked my mom, my mom was like, well, I don't know. My mom had 4 kids too. My mom, didn't do natural childbirth. That was not even something that we talked about, except that the answer was a no for me. It was a no. And, I've like bothering this lady, and all of a sudden, like, I find myself in this labor situation that is spiraling completely out of control and off the rails. And I mean, I'm in some type of pain that I didn't think was even possible to experience, let alone live through. At one point, this is how crazy I was, because this actually, I'm not even exaggerating, this sounded rational to me at one point. I looked at my mom in just sheer panic and terror, and out of my mind, pain. I looked at my mom and I said, oh my God, I think if I just had a gun, if I just had a gun, somebody could shoot me in like the foot or something, and then I would just like take the focus off of, and like I'm thinking these bizarre thoughts. And, this woman, this nurse, who was clearly not doing her job, I mean, she wasn't, I hope she's retired, kept telling me, how I was not going to, how I was going to be struggling for so long, and how, if I thought this was bad, I better, really get serious, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like trying to tune this chick out. And, all of a sudden this nurse realizes that I'm like actually I'm like 8 centimeters. Like, we're in like the transition phase, just like about. And she starts to freak out. She's like, oh no. Oh, you will not be having this baby. I will not be delivering this baby. You will wait for the doctor. I'm like literally about to kill this woman. And, I looked at my options, and I'm thinking, holy shit, I have very limited options here. I don't like the options. I'm thinking, like, this is not what I signed up for, not the plan. This was not the plan. I had 2 options. It was like to die, or I could deliver the baby. And I didn't like either one of those. Sounded terrible, and I felt completely out of control, which, I mean, I was out of control. I mean, I was like, your body's just doing this thing. And my mom had gone to those classes with me. You know, they did give me Pitocin. I failed to mention that. That, like, enhances your labor. Just makes the experience a little bit more intense, which I swear to you, I think that nurse, like, pumped it up just for, you know, just for shits and giggles, for her own enjoyment, because she was, like, really counting on me having this long labor. Well, I didn't have a long labor. I had a 2-hour labor. I think it had been 3 hours, like, from the time I got to the hospital till, like, I had my child. But my mom, she looked at me and she said, Katie, you have to do this. You're going to do this. You were made for this. Your body was born to do this. And I'm thinking, no, it's not. It's not. I can assure you that it's not. Like, I can't do it. Like, I don't want to do this. Nothing about this is comfortable. Nothing about this feels good. I mean, I was literally, I felt like I was going out of my mind because I didn't know how I could be experiencing what I was experiencing pain-wise and still be living. I mean, it just didn't seem possible. Like, unless you've experienced that, you don't know what that is. There's no way that you can know what that feels like, because it's nothing you have ever felt before. It's not something that you necessarily want to ever feel again. But my mom, she looked at me and she's like, you're going to do this. You were made for this. I need you to focus and remember that you are having your daughter. Like, this, it is go time, baby. You want to be an adult? Like, it's happening. This is happening. And I grasped the fact that, like, my alternative was to die. So, all right, I got to get this done. I don't know where the freaking anesthesiologist is, but, like, that's off the table. That ship sailed. There was going to be no drugs for Katie. You know, it's happening. And, oh, by the way, the nurse is telling me, don't push, don't you dare push. Bitch, like, my body's gonna push. Like, I just had to tune that woman out. I just couldn't listen to her. I could not listen to her. I had to focus. I had to, like, literally concentrate. And I birthed my daughter, and it hurt like hell. I mean, it effing hurt. But oh my God, I had this baby, and I took one look at her and was just, like, so overwhelmed at this other emotion that I had also never felt anything like it in my life. It was this rush of love that was so intense. I mean, it was as bad as that pain was, it made this intense love that I had for this new life, for this little life that I had just brought into the world that I was going to be responsible for, which terrified me. But it was so intense. And I can tell you that there is not a person in this world that will ever love my kids the way I love my kids, because I know what it took to get them into this world. It was not easy. I mean, I was so overwhelmed by the love that I had for that new life. And as a new mom, you've just never experienced all of these things. That love is next level love. And it's something you can't describe, just like you can't describe what labor feels like. But I can tell you, me personally, this is just me. I'm not, everybody, has their own little journey on, discovering these things. But absolutely 1,000,000%, I needed to feel that pain, because I needed to know what a treasure I had in this life. And I was young, and I don't think I would have cared for her and been the kind of mom that I have been able to be if I hadn't known what it took to bring her into this world, and all my kids. But of course, I'll talk about, I'm going to talk about labor number 4 as it compared to 1 in a minute, because it's important that I point that out. But I treasured her life. I valued, like, instantly. There was no, it didn't need time to develop. Like, it was an immediate, oh my gosh, I am so in love with this life. I mean, I would have done any single thing in the world, I don't care what it was, to protect her and to care for her and to love her and to raise her. I mean, it didn't matter that I was 19. It didn't matter what age I was. I mean, I was going to be the best mother, and I was going to protect this life and raise her. And come what may, there's no one that would have been able to do the job that I was able to do, because I know what it took to bring her into this world. And I'm the one that experienced that pain, and I contended for that. And that was, something that was my job to do. And, going into the next labor and the next labor and the next labor. Well, by the time I had Stella, I had done natural childbirth. Now, by the way, I also felt like so amazing because, I didn't have any of, so, you feel all the endorphins, all the hormones and everything that, you have, that I probably would imagine I wouldn't have felt so intensely. But, I know, okay, by birth number 4, not that I could say, okay, well, I'm looking so forward to, that pain, but I knew at that, by the time birth number 4 came around, I knew exactly what it felt like to be at 6 centimeters and 8 centimeters and 9. I mean, I could tell the doctor, oh, no, I'm at 8. No, I'm at 8.5. Okay, I'm at 8 3/4. I mean, like, it was this thing, because, like, she would check to see if I was, and she'd be like, oh my goodness, well, you, like, actually know. I'm like, yes, I do know, and I know I don't want that epidural. Like, the thought of that thing going in my back sounded horrible to me. I knew I could do it. I absolutely knew, okay, I know I can do. Like, I've done this before. I can do this. This is not going to be fun, but, I know exactly how much energy it's going to take. I know, thankfully I did have fast labors. I mean, they're very intense, but, that's just how my body did it. And so I knew going in, okay, this is what this feels like. This is what this feels like. No, I don't need that epidural. I just need to focus, because I've got to get this done for the joy set before me, so I can hold this little life that I'm trying to bring into this world. And it, my mindset totally changed. I mean, if you had seen me birthing Stella versus birthing Julia, it was like 2 different people. And it wasn't because I was, like, all of a sudden stronger physically necessarily. I mean, not at all. I mean, I was 30 years old when I had Stella. It was just that I had done it before. I knew how to do it. I knew that I could do it, and I knew what it was going to take to do it. And so, okay, I'm made for this. I can do this. Like, let's just go. Let's just get it done. So it was a totally different mindset. And, I feel like in life, when you are going through something that is not, it's definitely not part of your plan, and it is not comfortable, and it is not what you anticipated or expected, and all of the stuff that you've, tried or were counting on have totally failed. You have to know that you were made for this. Like, you were made for this. Like, you can do it. You're going to live through it. You're going to thrive through it. You're going to shock yourself, because you're going to, remember that, like, okay, I'm going to rely on God. I'm going to, like, use His strength to get me through this, because this is not something that I can do on, in myself. And as you go through more of life's trials, which obviously I'm comparing to this labor situation, it's not necessarily that the situations get easier, but it's, whose strength you're relying on to get you through those. And that's how you, for the joy set before you, you can endure because you know what is on the other side. And that's, when James talks about consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you encounter trials of various kinds, I'm thinking like, well, James and I have different views of joy because I don't think I would ever get to a place where I can consider it joy when I'm going through something that's very, very uncomfortable. Not the plan, not what I signed up for, not what I thought I was going to be getting. None of it looks like how I thought it was going to look. Okay, so how am I going to consider it joy? Well, because this situation is not going to be wasted. God is going to use it to birth something in you that, was planned and conceived in the secret place long in advance. It is not going to be wasted. And, it's okay that it doesn't look like how you thought it might look. The chances are, if you give it to Jesus, it's going to look so much better in time. It might be very, very messy in the moment. There's things that you might think, okay, well, I should have done this differently, or I should have done that differently. Like I should have gotten a new nurse immediately. That's okay. You know what? It was good that I had that nurse. I had to learn to tune that woman out because I could not let her voice and her negativity and her just overall just bitchy behavior affect my outcome. Like I had a job I had to do, and it was literally like do or die. This is what we're doing. And it was good. I hope she is retired now, but I'm glad that if anybody was going to get her, maybe she was just having a bad day. I don't know, but it doesn't matter because regardless of what's going on out here, I always know, okay, I've got, this is the path that God has planned for me for this time in history. So I'm going to do this with excellence, regardless of how it looks and definitely regardless of how it feels, because I know that this trial, that this, pain that I'm currently experiencing is perfecting something in me that is going to make me complete and lacking nothing. So while it may not feel great, for the joy set before me, I'm going to endure. Literally, Jesus, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, despising its shame, so that he could reconcile us to God out of his great love. Out of his great love, he sacrificed his life for our lives. So, when I decided I wanted to do this podcast, the whole concept of experiencing joy in the midst of deep pain, it sounds like a great idea. But I can tell you from my experience in life, it is possible. And I can say that with confidence because for the last 15 to 20 years, I've walked it out in so many different scenarios, and currently am dealing with a scenario it's very unjust. It's very unjust, but that situation doesn't affect the joy that I have because joy is not an emotion; it's a fruit of the Spirit, and the reason that I wanted to talk about this before we got into, finishing Pursue Unity is because, in that next episode, when I talk about the you, in unity, in pursue, it'll be the you, we're going to talk about like, how do we get fruit that is, that's going to bear fruit in its season, be like a tree planted by streams of water. And how do we get the fruit of the Spirit of love, joy, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control at all times in all things, regardless of our situation or our circumstance. And, I didn't feel like I can talk about that whenever I do talk about it without being able to just lay the foundation for this podcast itself, because the foundation of this whole entire thing is what got me. I mean, it's part of who, how he shaped me, how he formed me and showed me his goodness, and also showed me about how he created me. And, I needed to share at least the beginning. And I am going to, continue to tell some of that very first year of my marriage. But keep in mind, as I share, we are going to talk so much more about the goodness of God, and in contrast to what it might seem like I'm talking about, the badness of my ex-husband, who I care for very much. I want him to be the best he can be. And that's legitimate. I have felt like that for 20 years, and I'm always going to feel like that. And but that's because my foundation is rooted in who God is, and how I discovered his goodness, and how he changed the lens that I looked through, by my experience and the things that he allowed that were absolutely trials at the time, but they have perfected things in me that will sustain me throughout forever, because I've grown really deep roots in this process. So I know we are out of time, but I hope that you come back next week. We're going to rewind the clock, not quite as far as almost 20 years. I cannot believe Julie's going to be 20 in March. I was going through that whole thing 20 years ago, like right now. I mean, I remember, oh my goodness, being on bed rest and all that stuff. But we are going to hit rewind, and it will be just, a year or two later. So I hope that you stick around for that. And thank you guys so much for joining me. I am excited to continue sharing my journey on experiencing joy in the midst of pain, and how to experience the goodness of God in the process. But thank you guys so much for joining me. I will see you next time on When Life Throws You a Curve and How to Make the Adjustment. Come find me on social media, on Instagram and Twitter at Katie Hamilton 32, on Facebook at Katie Hamilton, and at When Life Throws You a Curve 32, and on YouTube at Katie Hamilton.
The content provided here was supplied by a third party for display on our platform. The content is not owned or created by Real News PR. The views and opinions are those of the creator.